Over the ages, the majesty, the beauty, and the power of rivers have inspired communities, nations, and civilizations. The waterways of the world have enriched cultures, sustained nations, and given birth to civilizations. They are a source of life itself, renewing the fertility of the earth. A river has many faces. The Brahmaputra, one of the greatest rivers on earth and among its least known, originates in a glacier in the remote western fastnesses of Tibet. It begins as a trickle, gathering speed and momentum as it traverses the nearly 3,000-kilometer journey to the Bay of Bengal. There is a traditional Indian phrase to describe nature's many moods, Navarasa. The Brahmaputra is the equivalent of the Navarasa, at times serene, gentle and meandering, inspiring meditation. At other times, angry and destructive, it snaps communications, submerges property, disrupts carefully crafted plans, isolating entire regions for weeks on end. Everywhere, its raw primal power is on show. It dismisses human efforts to span it with contempt. These large ships were picked up by a storm and tossed like toys a kilometer inland. They landed on rice fields, where they will remain for months until high water comes to their rescue. People enjoy the river. It is a source of the simple pleasures of life, of relaxation and contemplation. In addition, it is a creator of livelihoods and a highway for commerce. The Brahmaputra has been a trade route for grain and salt, fish and textiles, building material, bamboo, and priceless teak. Today, bridges span different parts of the river, enabling quicker transport and communications. People have had to change and adapt to the river. But questions still remain.
এই নৈ পাৰত থকা আপোনাৰ কিমান বছৰ হ'ল? বহুত বছৰ হ'ল। এই নৈখনৰ বিষয়ে অলপ ক'ব নেকি? কিনো কম? এই নৈ মোৰ সকলো শেষ কৰিলে। যোৱাবাৰ ঘৰটো উটাই লৈ গ'ল। এই বছৰ খেতি গোটেইখিনি মাৰি পেলালে। এই নৈখন আমাৰ বাবে কালহে। তাতকৈ আৰু কি কম?
It is common to hear such voices of anger and despair along the course of the Brahmaputra. Yet few can deny that the river is the source of inspiration, the mainstay of local economies and cultures from Tibet to the Bay of Bengal. Despite the complaints, there is a subconscious acknowledgement of this role. At daybreak, a fisherman walks from his home to the river bank and prays for a good catch before going to his boat. An old Muslim says his prayers on the river. A Tibetan monk gazes at the waters from a monastery near Lhasa. In our living traditions, a special relationship has always existed with nature. This sequence of ancient ritual and prayer by the Mishing villager on the banks of the Brahmaputra continues till this day. Traditional faiths and a resilient spirituality touch the valleys of the river. The Brahmaputra flows majestically through Tibet, northeast India, and Bangladesh. It is one of the great waterways of the world, and from infancy to the final lap of its journey to the Bay of Bengal, it is surrounded and sustained by vastness. Whether it is its origins in Tibet, the hills and plains of Assam, or the floodplains of Bangladesh, everything about it is gigantic, seemingly endless. Nearly 500 million people depend on the waters of the Brahmaputra, its tributaries, and the Ganga, the other great river of the eastern Indian subcontinent. Few rivers have as much of an impact on the lives of so many people as the Brahmaputra and the Ganga. Of these, the Brahmaputra is the bigger waterway. Travelers along the Tsangpo in Tibet are stunned by the vastness of the landscape on either side of the river. Nothing prepares one for the majesty and grandeur of Tibet. The plateau soars to an average height of about 3,000 meters. Few know of the origins of the Brahmaputra. Fact and fiction, myth and geography have meshed to form a fabric of stories. Intrepid men from the Survey of India tried in vain to penetrate this Himalayan wall. It was not until 1913 that two British explorers, following the course of the river, proved that the Tsangpo and the Brahmaputra were one river. Its sources are in the region of the Chemayungdung Glacier. Not far are Mansarovar Lake and the massive hulk of Mount Kailash, sacred to Hindus and Buddhists. The river changes its name no less than 6 times as it spans 3 countries: Tsangpo, Dihang, Siang, Brahmaputra, Jamuna, and finally the Podda. The Tsangpo in Tibet is predominantly a narrow river. At times, it is a furious stream, plunging through deep gorges, having carved its way through 5,000 meters or more over millions of years. In its early course, it passes through inhospitable terrain and harsh conditions, with no human habitation and little vegetation. In this remote and tough land, a river crossing can be hazardous. The ferries here have been closed because of the swift currents and high water. But a light yak-skin boat skims over the rapids without concern for official edicts. This one can hold 14 people and was built from the hides of 6 yaks, the large Tibetan bison. The raft would sink if it was made of wood. Hundreds of millions of years ago, the world was a very different place, as gigantic tectonic pressures forced continents apart and eventually placed India in its present geographical location. As the Asian and Indian land plates ground against each other, causing the earth to buckle, they formed the Tibetan Plateau, the Himalayas, as well as the Assam Valley and plains. Tibet is one of the most sparsely populated and spectacularly desolate places on earth. Home to a sturdy and deeply religious people, Tibet's isolation has ensured that it has remained one of the least known places in the world. As the river broadens, it forms the first of the islands that dot its later course. The valley is a source of bountiful harvests. Men and women work swiftly, cutting and stacking the barley crop. The fields glow with the yellow of mustard, and varieties of vegetables, fruits and herbs in the broader Yarlung Valley as the river moves eastward. In the midst of seeming plenty, there is an abrupt reminder of the river's devastating power. An idyllic setting has turned into a nightmare. Overnight, the river has burst into the barley fields of the village of Zangri, and every able-bodied man, woman and child rushes to help. Yet hardship means that the Tibetans delight even more in those simple pleasures that bring color into their lives: festivals, dance and music. Buddhism is deeply rooted in Tibet. Every moment, every place, every person is a reminder of its overwhelming influence. There have been some superficial changes: discos, new buildings and restaurants, Japanese cars, crowded markets. But the religious core of the Tibetan way of life is still intact and vibrant. The Tibetan capital is Lhasa, located on the banks of the Kyushu, a tributary of the Tsangpo. Once called the Forbidden City because foreigners were denied access to it, Lhasa retains its traditional and historic roots despite physical changes. The most dominant feature of Lhasa is the 7th century Potala Palace, which was rebuilt in the 17th century and towers over the landscape. To the Tibetans, it is the Jokhang that is the most sacred. The chapels and corridors are aglow with butter lamps. Around the Jokhang is the Bakhor, the sacred pilgrim path that serves also as the central market. Southwest of Lhasa is Shigatse, a 14th century city built at the confluence of the Nyangchu and Tsangpo, which is best known as the traditional home of the Panchen Lama, the second most important religious figure in Tibet after the Dalai Lama. Tashi Lumpo is a city of monks with cobbled streets and a vast network of halls, chapels and rooms filled with the drone of ancient chants. The river is never far away. Whether it is en route to the Yamdrok-tso, the holy turquoise lake, or at Gyatse, where a spectacular fort commands the heights, and a monastery where architecture has been influenced by Nepali and Indian styles stands. Mystery and magic reside in dark rooms and chapels of ancient monasteries which are being restored to their former glory. The river's presence too is constant. The monastery at Pabonka near Lhasa is said to be a replica of Kamakhya temple in Assam, which also overlooks the Brahmaputra. In this sprawling land, time and life have a pace of their own. Only the river seems to hurry, gathering strength as it rushes towards India. The Tsangpo thunders through the Namcha Barwa gorges, the deepest cleft on the face of the earth, bursting over boulders and through jungles to finally emerge at the tiny village of Geling in India. By this time, it has already travelled more than half of its long journey to the sea. Geling, a village of 900 persons, is the first Indian settlement along the Tsangpo. Above the village is a Gompa, a tiny Buddhist shrine built more than 40 years ago. The terrain is difficult, and Geling, on the border with China, can only be reached by regular Indian Air Force sorties which ferry passengers and supplies. Here the river changes its name. It is the Siang, earlier called the Dihang. The river is a thin sliver of water rushing through the hills. From Geling, the river begins its drop to the plains, with huge rapids and cascades, especially at Tuting and Yingkiong. Earlier, only bamboo suspension bridges spanned the river. A few years ago, a large steel and cement bridge had replaced the old suspension bridge. But in the summer of 2000, a great water surge caused by a flash flood in Tibet destroyed the new bridge and every single man-made structure across the Siang. Yet, old beliefs remain. The Siang Valley is home to the Adis, a large and colorful community. In the villages of Arunachal Pradesh, little appears to have changed over the centuries. This is a kebang, where village heads have gathered to meet a local leader and to enjoy a feast of meat, fish, rice and apong, freshly brewed local millet beer. The Adis practice chuming, or shifting cultivation. The crowns of the hills are balding, their flanks are scarred. This form of agriculture persists, for no alternative has yet been developed. Elsewhere, villagers have built this totem, to ward off diseases and evil spirits. A bout of chickenpox has hit a distant village. The Adis on this side are playing safe. A major tributary of the Brahmaputra is the Lohit, which flows down from China. The annual Makar Sankranti festival takes place on the banks of the Lohit at Parsuram Kund. This is an important place for Hindu pilgrims, for it was here that the legendary warrior Parsuram is believed to have been freed of the sin of matricide. As dusk falls, the hum of a tiny hydroelectric plant fills the air. The roads are circuitous and tortuous. An easy way across the valley appears to be the long, swaying suspension bridges. These are built by entire villages working together for weeks. The untutored Adi villagers who build these engineering marvels were praised for their skill by Chinese travelers as far back as the 11th century. The hills near the town of Pasighat, not far from here, were witness to one of the most dramatic events in the history of the Brahmaputra. On August 15, 1950, an earthquake measuring 8.7 on the Richter scale devastated the Assam Valley and changed the course of the river forever. Hills collapsed and flash floods buried towns and villages under millions of tons of rock, silt and water. Along the river, new communities, societies, and economies emerge. One of the most visible signs of change are the prosperous tea gardens on either side of the river. The city of Dibrugarh is one of India's biggest tea-producing centers. The plantations were started by the British in the 19th century, but are now owned by Indian companies. These tea garden workers are the descendants of Adivasi tribes of central India who were forced by the British to travel to Assam as indentured laborers. Many died under appalling conditions. This is where the strong Assam brew is made, famous across the world, and one of India's most profitable exports. The tea garden communities are among the largest of the many ethnic groups in the Brahmaputra Valley and retain many of their traditions of music and dance. The river is again changing course, and scientists say that it is now moving southward. The consequences of this change of course are still being worked out. In winter, the river is divided by many channels, making crossing even more difficult. The unique characteristics of the Brahmaputra in Assam have begun to assert themselves. The emergence of small islands, of sandbanks or saporis that are seen further downstream in Bangladesh, the silt in the water. In the 13th century, a Thai prince named Sukafa left his kingdom in the Shan area of northern Thailand and southeastern Burma and travelled to the Brahmaputra valley. En route, he crossed the Patkai range on the western flank of Burma. With him was a small band of followers with elephants and hardy ponies. Sukafa and his group were the Ahoms, who dominated Assam for 600 years until the Burmese and then the British forced them to yield. This was the most glorious period of Assam's medieval history, where the Ahoms asserted control over the entire valley, subdued the hill tribes, and defeated another great power of the time, the Mughals, who dominated much of the subcontinent. They organized a well-structured system of administration and brought Buddhism back to Assam. Later, they converted to Hinduism, and their times are meticulously recorded in the Ahom Buranjis, or royal chronicles. Although the Ahoms are a small and dispersed community today, their days of power and glory live on in the solid, striking buildings from where they reigned. They took pleasure in sports and dance. Elephant and bull fights were watched here by the monarch, with the royal household and courtiers in attendance. Over the centuries, cultures here have evolved in step with the natural cycle of farming. In the Brahmaputra Valley, the most vibrant celebration of this culture is Bihu. Rhythm of the seasons, the unchanging face of farming. For centuries, these lands have been enriched by the soil brought down by the Brahmaputra and the flood waters. The flood leaves the silt behind, creating a fertile top layer. In the heart of the river lies one of its great treasures. Majuli, one of the largest river islands in the world. Majuli is home to unique wetland ecosystems as well as human cultures. The great adjutant stork, the lesser adjutant stork, the cormorant, the Brahmini duck, saurus cranes, and other migratory birds from other parts of Asia come to rest and feed. The Mishing community lives here in houses on stilts. This is to protect them from the high water of floods. But the erosion is devastating the island, gouging out great chunks from its soft soil every year. Majuli is shrinking, and perhaps even dying. Majuli is a major international heritage site, particularly for its Hindu Vaishnavite satras or monasteries, which date back to the 15th and 16th centuries. They were founded by Srimanta Sankaradev, a saint and reformer whose influence is still felt today. Such monasteries are to be found in Majuli and across the Brahmaputra valley. They preserve the traditions of religious music and dance, which Sankaradev used to popularize the Reformed faith. Here, the male dancers, who are monks, depict the divine love of Radha and the Hindu god Krishna. But even these satras are being forced by erosion and flooding to relocate on the mainland. On the northern bank of the Brahmaputra lies Tezpur, a town of temples, a river port steeped in legend. Tezpur's history rings with tales of ancient passion, such as the love of Aniruddha and Chitralekha, of bravery, ballads, bloodshed, and mythology. A 3-kilometer bridge spans the Brahmaputra here, linking either side of the valley. A short distance upstream lies the Kaziranga National Park, a popular tourist destination. Its most celebrated denizen is the great Indian one-horned rhinoceros, an ungainly creature which wallows in swamps much of the day and looks like a relic from the dinosaur age. Built like a tank, the rhino is hunted by poachers for its horn, a few inches of matted hair that fetches high prices in Southeast Asia and China. Many other species inhabit Kaziranga, hiding in its high grass or moving about in the wetlands. Down the river lies Guwahati, the gateway to India's northeast, the region's economic hub and one of its historic cities. The temple of Kamakhya draws many pilgrims and is dedicated to Parvati, the consort of Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction. Apart from the rush of pilgrims, the temple complex is also home to a group of ancient turtles, slow, slimy, silent, and watchful. There are other places of worship by the river in Guwahati, such as Umananda, where the Hindu god Shiva is the main deity. At Haju, a short distance from Guwahati, is the shrine of Horogrib Madhav.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Haju is also famous for the 900-year-old mosque of Puamakka. It lies at the top of a hill and was built on land that was given to the first Muslim settlers of the region, an Iraqi prince and his followers who came in the 11th century. The clatter of looms is loud in the bylanes of Sualkuchi. This little town on the banks of the Brahmaputra is the heart of Assam's famous golden silk industry, the Muga. Silk is the town's lifeline. Entire families are involved in this elaborate process, reeling and drying the silk before taking it to the shuttle loom. Here, nimble fingers and feet beat out a staccato rhythm as a magical fabric takes shape. The presence of the river helped Sualkuchi's silks to flourish. At one time, the town used to be an important port of call for steamers. Not any longer. As at Sualkuchi, the river guides the destiny of another craft at Sarthebari. Under a blistering sun and in a small hut, workers sit around a furious furnace, hammering, sculpting, and polishing bare metal into familiar shapes: bowls, cymbals, and platters. Nearby is Borpeta, a major trading center where a large and influential monastery is situated. The grand 16th century building draws worshippers through the day and has seen the evolution of music and dance forms. Not far from Borpeta is the land of the Boros, one of the oldest ethnic groups in the valley. The Boros brought the art of rearing silkworms and settled agriculture to the region. Indeed, their name for the Brahmaputra is Burumbutur, or swirling water. Southwest of Borpeta, the river begins its great downward sweep into Bangladesh. A Sikh Gurdwara dating back to the 17th century stands on the river bank. There is a small but flourishing community of Assamese Sikhs who appear to have forgotten their own Punjabi language. Their ancestors had settled here more than 300 years ago, but their traditions remain vibrant. The river has begun to change dramatically, its flooding capacity visible even in the dry season. Dozens of channels open up, making travel difficult. The main channel is shallow because of the sediment and low water level. On the banks, craftsmen work furiously on bamboo and cane, slicing up long bamboo poles, making prefab fences and mats that are shipped downstream to Bangladesh. It is a scene that spans the border, a culture bridging skills and people.
বন্ধুরে আমার পানে বারেক ফিরা চাও আবার তুমি আসবে কবে শুধু বইলা
The river flows down to Bangladesh. It's difficult to make out the borders here. The landscape is similar, flat, without a tree in sight, but with fields of bulrushes touched by white tufts swaying in the breeze. On the islands, farmers till the soil and herd their cattle across streams. Children play as a Bhatyali singer calls out with the pain and joy of life along the river.
জোয়ার এলো মন মাতিয়া এলো নদীর বুকে
This is Noonkhor Chor, the place where the Brahmaputra enters Bangladesh and joins the Dhorla or Dudhkumar near the small district town of Kurigram. From this point, the river moves inexorably towards its final destination, the Bay of Bengal, becoming broader with every passing kilometer. The Brahmaputra is now in the autumn of its age, seemingly mellower and nostalgic. The Brahmaputra is to change its name again. Later downstream, it is called the Jamuna, before joining the Ganga to become the Padma. Finally, it merges with the Meghna and falls into the Bay of Bengal. Early in the morning, Silmari Ghat is quiet as fishermen set out for the day. The Brahmaputra and its tributaries fiercely erode the shore here, at Kurigram and at Bilashi Ghat. The river changed course more than 200 years ago, and today the route of the old Brahmaputra is dry and shallow. Life has a special resonance here, a resonance of many centuries. A young woman leaves the home of her parents, having come for the birth of her first child. She must now return to her husband. The river continues to bind these traditions. The Brahmaputra is spanned only once in this stretch, further down at Sirajganj, where the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank have helped Bangladesh build a bridge that can carry both trains and road transport. The Jamuna Bridge means that many of the giant ferries that dot the riverscape of Bangladesh will lose their importance. The ferries and many types of boats of Bangladesh are as important to its economy as the rivers themselves. Without them, the land and its people would shrivel and suffer. The rivers nourish the countries through which they flow, cleansing, cooling, and soothing. These giant Norwegian-built ships carry trucks buses, cars, and people, thousands of people, on a daily ritual over distances great and small. It's a time to relax and to let the river do the work. The Brahmaputra merges with the Padma or Ganga at Arichar, a giant confluence, an inland sea where the waves toss small boats about and singers remember their loves and pain. It is a place where fishermen cast their long nets out and draw them in, a rhythm as old as time itself. The river is always throbbing with life and entrepreneurship. These cows have come from India, and they are headed for the slaughterhouse. Many other commodities flow across the borders without much hindrance, all of them in what is ubiquitously called the informal sector. Simply put, they are smuggled across. The river here inspires creative skills as it does upstream in India. The rattle of looms reminds travelers of Sualkuchi, the village of the golden thread upstream in Assam. The river is a great cultural influence. Of that there is no doubt. Made in Tangail, these exquisite saris are the pride of Bangladesh. Dhaka Sadar port is bursting with energy and boats. Everywhere vessels bounce on the water, bump against each other, or hold a steady course for their destination. For the most, they hurry by, carrying local passengers from one side of the Budhi Ganga river to another. The port holds the key to Dhaka's importance as a major commercial and political hub, as well as the capital of Bangladesh. The glacial stream of the Himalayas is now a giant river on the final leg of its extraordinary journey from Tibet to the Bay of Bengal. A unique mix of communities have prospered along the river's course. Even here, it draws divergent communities like the Bedes, the water gypsies of Bangladesh. In addition, they are also snake charmers and itinerant musicians. From before daybreak, boats and ships have been moving towards the vast fishing grounds in the river. There are parking lots for those needing a break. But as the sun's first rays glitter off the water, this highway comes alive with vessels of every kind rushing for the daily catch of hilsa, that most prized of freshwater fish in Bangladesh and eastern India. The number of fishing vessels appears to swell as the river moves downstream. But is there enough fish for so many? At times, the river appears festooned with colorful ribbons, streamers, sails and flags, as if to celebrate its relationship with its people. Land's End is Hatia. This large island has been built by the silt deposited by the Brahmaputra and its tributaries over the centuries. Those who live here face the wrath of the elements. but they know that they have nowhere else to go, no other way of life. Over the centuries, on either bank, the breath of so much hope and despair.
বাৰু এটা কথা কওকচোন, এই নৈ পাৰত থাকিবলৈ লোৱাৰ আগতে আপুনি ক'ত বাস কৰিছিলে? সেই পাহাৰৰ ফালে। ইয়ালৈ আহিলে কিয়? ইয়াত খেতি বৰ ভাল হয়, বছৰি নৈ পলহ পেলাই থৈ যায়। আৰু ইয়াত কি পায়? ইয়াত মাছ সদায় পাওঁ। তেতিয়াহ'লে কেনেকৈনো নৈখন আপোনাৰ বাবে কাল হ'ল?
This silence is an answer in itself. It reflects a deeper understanding, a changing perception of the river as an ally and friend, bestowing the gift of life itself. The end of a journey on the Brahmaputra marks the closing of one quest, the beginning of another. The river flows endlessly, eternally, carrying with it the hopes of millions, nourishing the flow and ebb of civilizations. For every dawn brings a new story, a new hope, a new challenge.
ভাই না